I was told the Concorde Spire was a marvel of diplomacy and design, a place where centuries of interstellar peacekeeping and alliances were forged. When I finally stepped onto its massive docking platform, I understood why. The station hovered like a colossal silver tree above the void, its limbs stretching out in delicate arcs, each branch a cluster of chambers and embassies from dozens of species, their ships orbiting like loyal satellites. From Earth, it was a long way to the edge of civilized space. I'd spent months training for this moment, everything from advanced xenolinguistics and political theory to martial arts and negotiation under pressure. But no amount of classroom preparation could have readied me for the silence I walked into. No banners fluttered from the docking bay. No welcoming committee was assembled to greet me. The sterile air smelled faintly of ionized metals and recycled oxygen, cold and clean. The massive airlock hissed shut behind me, sealing off the cold vacuum outside, but it didn't bring any comfort. It was as if the spire itself held its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. I carried only a small bag with essentials, diplomatic credentials, some communication devices, a weapon concealed in a sheath at my side, and a well-thumbed volume of Earth's diplomatic protocols. The weight of my mission pressed down on me like gravity. My name is Elias Vaughn, Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Concorde, a coalition of alien civilizations that govern the trade routes and laws across this sector of space. The Concorde wasn't just a council, it was the gatekeeper of Earth's future. Our planet had long been on the fringe, an untested newcomer in an ancient, complex political web. The irony was that while Earth had rushed to send its best and brightest here to gain respect and protection, the moment I arrived, the cold shoulder of silence was the only greeting I received. I strode through the labyrinthine corridors of the spire, my boots clicking on the polished floor. My HUD, a soft overlay in my vision, displayed live translations of the various languages spoken around me, a constant stream of alien chatter that underscored my isolation. I could see the signs, the welcome delegates banner hanging somewhere deep in the lower sectors, faded and moth-eaten. The offices where Earth's delegation was supposed to brief me were empty. I pulled out my compad and tried calling my contacts. Nothing. No reply. A knot tightened in my stomach. That's when it happened. A small, folded note slipped silently into my pocket. No one was near, no one obvious. The handwriting was barely legible, the ink faint, but the message struck me like a thunderclap. Don't trust the Naxxari. They know. The Naxxari were one of the oldest and most insidious species in the Concorde. Masters of subtle manipulation, their six-eyed forms and serpentine grace were both respected and feared. They were diplomats and spies, always working several steps ahead. If they knew something and wanted me to know they knew, then the game had changed. I folded the note back into my pocket and pressed on, every sense alert. The Concorde Spire was a city and a fortress. It was built to survive wars and whispers alike. The corridors twisted and turned like a maze, decorated with alien art that depicted their histories, victories, and tragedies. Here, a towering statue of the Tython, a species known for their brutal honor duels, loomed near a serene water garden maintained by the Silther, whose bioluminescent tendrils hung like curtains of light. In the main hall, delegates from dozens of worlds milled about in formal robes and intricate uniforms. I observed them carefully. The slender Cytheri, their faces obscured by shimmering veils. The squat Groln, whose armored scales reflected the harsh lights. The elegant Mren, who seemed to glide rather than walk. But no Earth representatives. I had trained to read body language, to detect lies, to navigate the cultural minefield of interstellar politics. And now, walking alone through the throng of strangers who whispered and watched me from guarded distances, I realized this was more than just cold shoulders. I was being deliberately ignored. I tried to approach the liaison officer for Earth's delegation, a human named Joseph Crane, the chief diplomat I was supposed to meet immediately upon arrival. But his office was locked and dark. No one knew where he was. With every step, the silence grew louder. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time was slippery on the spire. I found a quiet alcove near the observation deck, a place overlooking the endless starfield beyond. The stars were bright, distant beacons in the blackness, but I felt further from home than ever. Then, from the corner of my eye, a shadow moved. A figure stepped forward, a human, ragged, bruised, eyes darting nervously. He carried himself with the cautious urgency of a man on the run. "Ambassador Vaughn," he whispered, sliding a small dated chip into my hand. "This is a warning. The delegation, they're gone. Assassinated. You're next." My heart stopped. The weight of those words crushed me. "Who? What?" I demanded, scanning the corridor for anyone who might be listening. The man shook his head. "Too many questions. Trust no one, especially not the Naxxari. They orchestrated it all. The Concord is not what you think. And Earth's place here is more fragile than you realize." Before I could ask more, he vanished into the shadows, leaving only the faint scent of burnt ozone behind. I was alone again, but now the silence was deafening. I took a deep breath and tried to collect myself. The story didn't add up. Why assassinate Earth's delegation? What did the Naxxari want? And why send me alone, unprotected, into this den of vipers? My training was clear. Never show weakness. Never panic. Never trust too quickly. I accessed the station's secure network through my wrist comm, starting a covert scan for unusual activity. There were encrypted transmissions pinging between the Naxxari quarters and unknown locations. A slow, creeping feeling of conspiracy settled over me like a shroud. I had to find allies. But whom? As night fell on the spire, or rather, the artificial lighting dimmed to simulate it, I moved toward the area known as the Diplomatic Concourse, a place where informal talks happened. Deals were brokered over simulated gardens and alien cuisine. I remembered one name from my training: General Koran, a warlord of the Krell Dominion. The Krell were notorious for their brutality in war, but also respected for their unbreakable honor. Earth had few friends here, but the Krell might respect strength. I found him in the concourse, surrounded by heavily armed guards and a court of advisors. His massive frame and battle scars told a story of 1,000 battles, and his eyes locked on me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Earth's ambassador," he said gruffly, "you're a long way from home, and dangerously alone." "I'm here to negotiate," I said, keeping my voice steady. He smiled, a slow, dangerous curl of his lips. "We'll see if you survive the negotiation." That night, I sat alone in my quarters, the weight of the message and the empty delegation heavy on my mind. I stared at the stars outside my window, thinking about Earth, about my family, my home, the world that had entrusted me with this impossible task. If the Concord was a game, the stakes had just become deadly. And I was about to learn that in this game, diplomacy wasn't just words and treaties, it was survival. Because out here, on the edge of known space, the universe didn't care if humanity lived or died. It was up to me to prove that we were worth saving, and I wasn't about to let Earth be erased without a fight. The morning on the Concord Spire began like any other in this swirling hive of diplomacy and quiet menace, a complex dance where every word, every gesture, could mean peace or war, life or death. Except, for me, it was the first true test. I knew I wasn't just here to shake hands and exchange pleasantries. Earth's seat on the Galactic Concord was fragile, hanging by a thread I was desperate to find. The note from the shadowed courier, "Don't trust the Naxxari. They know," echoed in my mind, a sinister refrain that refused to let me rest. I couldn't shake the feeling that every move I made was being watched. My training told me to be calm, collected, diplomatic, but beneath that, a raw instinct screamed danger. The formal gathering was held in the Grand Forum, a vast circular chamber illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow from above, a dome of crystalline panels filtering the distant starlight. The walls were etched with the histories of the Concord, in languages I barely understood. This room had seen centuries of peace treaties, trade agreements, and the rare but inevitable declarations of war. As I entered, all conversation hushed. Delegates from dozens of species eyed me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I was the newest player in their ancient game. The Naxxari delegate was there. Of course, Silthrax, a creature with 6 shimmering eyes and serpentine features, his expression unreadable but full of quiet menace. He greeted me with a slow, deliberate nod that didn't reach those many eyes. I took my place among the representatives. Protocol demanded formality, garb of one's culture, words weighed and chosen carefully. I was dressed in Earth's official envoy uniform, modest but sharp, a symbol of humanity's earnest desire for respect. The host of the gathering, a towering figure from the Drath species, opened the floor with a formal welcome. They spoke in the Galactic Concord's common tongue, a language painstakingly designed to be neutral and precise. I responded with the customary address from Earth, careful to blend our words with diplomatic respect and hopeful strength. But beneath the surface of words, the room simmered with tension. After the opening speeches, it was time for the ceremonial sharing of drinks, a tradition symbolizing trust and openness. Each delegate offers a ceremonial chalice filled with a beverage from their home world, an unspoken promise of goodwill. Silthrax approached, offering me a goblet made from a translucent, iridescent material that shifted colors in the light. The liquid inside was a deep violet, smelling faintly of spice and something floral. I lifted the chalice with steady hands. "To new beginnings," I said, meeting the Naxari's many eyes. "To the future of the Concord," he replied, voice smooth as silk. The first sip was strange but not unpleasant, a warm rush that spread through my throat. Then the world shifted, my vision blurred. A sharp pain stabbed my chest. My breath caught. A wave of dizziness slammed into me like a freight train. I stumbled, nearly dropping the chalice. "Ambassador," someone shouted. I forced myself to stay upright, fighting the sudden weakness that threatened to drag me down. My body was betraying me. The poison was subtle, designed not to kill, but to disable and mark. I knew the message. "You are vulnerable. We can reach you anytime." Somewhere in the chaos, I caught the expression on Silthrax's face, a flicker of satisfaction, cold and triumphant. The Naxari were sending a warning. I was under their control now, or at least their threat. I retreated to the medical wing, supported by aides who had been watching me closely. The medics worked quickly, pumping my system with counteragents and stimulants, fighting the toxin coursing through my veins. As I lay on the bio bed, struggling to catch my breath, my mind raced. The poison was sophisticated, an exotic neurotoxin that interfered with muscle control and cognition, but it wouldn't kill outright. That was the point. It was a message to all who dared oppose the Naxari's will, and I was already in their crosshairs. After hours of treatment and observation, I was allowed back to my quarters, though my strength was not fully restored. The message was clear. The Concord was no safe harbor for humanity. If I wanted to survive, I needed more than just diplomatic skill. I needed power, or at least the semblance of it. I reflected on my options. The Naxari were master manipulators, known for turning allies into enemies and enemies into pawns. To outmaneuver them, I had to find an unexpected ally, someone with enough strength to balance their influence. That's when I thought of General Koran. Koran was the embodiment of everything the Concord feared and respected about the Krell Dominion. A brutal warlord with a reputation for fierce honor and unyielding resolve. The Krell were not known for their diplomacy, but for their battlefield prowess and their grudging respect for strength. In the corridors of the Spire, whispers circulated about Koran's growing ambition and his disdain for the slow machinations of the Concord's politicking. If anyone could stand up to the Naxari, it was him. Finding Koran wasn't difficult. The Krell commander's chambers were guarded by hulking soldiers, their armor etched with scars of countless battles. I requested an audience through official channels, expecting a dismissive reply or outright rejection. Instead, the guards allowed me passage, though their grip on their weapons was firm. I entered a grand chamber where Koran sat, a mountain of muscle and scars. His eyes burned with a fire that spoke of uncountable wars and victories. He did not rise to greet me, instead regarding me with a measured, appraising gaze. "Ambassador Elias Vaughn," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You come far from Earth, but what do you want from a soldier like me?" "I want an alliance," I said carefully, "your strength against their subtlety." The Naxari poisoned the halls of the Concord with lies and treachery. "Earth cannot stand alone," he chuckled, a sound like gravel shifting. "You speak boldly for a human, stranger. Most here would cower or grovel." "I'm not most," I replied. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but alliances have prices." We spoke long into the artificial night, trading truths and threats beneath the dim glow of the chamber's lights. Koran's terms were harsh: military aid, intelligence sharing, and a promise to assist his campaigns in exchange for his backing on the Concord floor. I hesitated. Earth was far from a warrior race, and I was a diplomat, not a soldier. But the stakes were clear. Without allies who commanded fear and respect, humanity's fragile position would crumble. I agreed. The next day, back in the Grand Forum, I felt the shift in the room. The alliance with Quran was no secret, and whispers followed me like shadows. The Naxari delegate's gaze hardened, but he said nothing, a warning in itself. The poisoned chalice was more than an attempt on my life. It was a signal to the entire Concord that Earth was a player now, willing to fight for its place. And I was ready. As I prepared for the upcoming rounds of negotiation, I realized that diplomacy here was not just about words. It was a deadly game of power and deception, where friends and enemies wore the same masks, and trust was the rarest commodity of all. But for Earth, there was no other choice. We had to survive, we had to thrive, or be erased. The Concord Spire, the grand seat of interstellar diplomacy, was a place where shadows moved as freely as light. By now, I knew better than to trust what I saw on the surface. Every smile, every handshake, every diplomatic nod was layered with hidden motives, agendas, and often outright lies. After the events of the poisoned chalice, I had become painfully aware that Earth's diplomatic mission was no ordinary assignment. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm of political venom, where one misstep meant ruin, not just for me, but for all of humanity. I woke that morning to the hum of the Spire's life support systems, a faint but constant reminder that, no matter how alien this place was, it was very much alive and watching. My body still bore faint traces of the neurotoxin's lingering effects. The medics had done their best, but I was hardly back to full strength. My mind, however, was sharper than ever, painfully so, because now every glance from a delegate felt like a threat. Every whispered conversation behind closed doors a potential trap. The corridors of the Spire seemed darker today, even in the perpetual artificial daylight. The distant echo of footsteps, the murmur of voices in alien tongues, all blended into a symphony of paranoia. I had a meeting scheduled with the Council of Three, the ruling body of the Galactic Concord, a triumvirate that represented the most powerful factions. The council was notoriously secretive, their sessions held behind layers of security and linguistic encryption. But I had to be there. My alliance with General Koran had shaken the balance of power, and I could already feel the ripples spreading through the political currents. The council chambers were located in the heart of the Spire, a high, vaulted room with 3 imposing thrones carved from a single piece of black obsidian, each throne occupied by a figure radiating authority and menace. The first was the Drath matron, Lyrian, a tall, slender figure whose pale skin shimmered faintly and whose sharp eyes missed nothing. The second was the Krell general, Koran, whose presence was as commanding in this chamber as on any battlefield. The third was the Naxari warlord, Silfrax, who regarded me with cold, calculating eyes. I entered the chamber alone, flanked by silent guards, my heart pounding beneath my diplomatic vest. Ambassador Vaughn, Lyrian said, her voice cool and melodic. You arrived just in time. Her gaze lingered on me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I realized that the council wanted to test me, to see if Earth was a serious player or just a naive upstart. Silthrax's eyes narrowed, his multiple irises flickering in what I guessed was amusement or contempt. Karan, seated solidly between them, gave me a nod, a small gesture of solidarity in this den of vipers. Thank you, council members, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I come with a proposal to strengthen the Concord and to address the growing instability caused by covert manipulations. Lyrian raised an eyebrow. Speak plainly, Ambassador. I outlined the situation as I saw it, the poison attack, the Naxari's suspected involvement, and the urgent need for a coalition to counteract subversive actions threatening the Concord's fragile peace. The council listened, but their expressions were unreadable. I knew that accusations, even veiled ones, were dangerous here, especially when they involved a member species. Silthrax's voice was smooth as he responded, Ambassador, the Naxari have always sought peace. Perhaps your weakness was an accident or an overreach of your own caution. His words were laced with poison. I could see the others waiting for me to falter, but I held my ground. Our vulnerability was no accident, I said, and silence on this matter will only encourage further attacks. The chamber fell into heavy silence. Lyrian's fingers tapped rhythmically on her throne's armrest. Karan finally spoke, his deep voice cutting through the tension. Earth's survival depends on strength. I stand with Ambassador Vaughn. That endorsement was a small victory, but the real test was yet to come. After the council session ended, I was led back through the twisting corridors of the spire. The weight of eyes, seen and unseen, pressed against me. I knew I had made enemies. Later that day, I was summoned to a private meeting with Lyrian. Her chamber was a sleek, minimalist space, bathed in soft blue light that seemed to pulse with a quiet energy. She motioned for me to sit, her gaze sharp. "You are brave, Ambassador, but naive," she said. "Naive," I echoed. "The Concord is a tapestry woven from countless threads: loyalty, fear, ambition, desperation. To pull one thread carelessly risks unraveling the whole." I met her gaze steadily. "Then help me understand, matron. How does Earth fit into this tapestry?" She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You are an unexpected thread, one that disrupts the pattern." I thought of the poisoned chalice, the warnings, the shifting alliances. "You mean I'm a threat?" "No," she said, "a possibility." That evening, as I prepared my report, my comlink buzzed with a secure message. It was from Quran. "Meet me in the lower levels. Urgent." The lower levels were the underbelly of the spire, a labyrinth of maintenance tunnels and shadowed alcoves, far from the polished marble and glowing panels of the diplomatic floors. I was wary, but knew I had to go. The corridors in the lower levels were cold and dimly lit, humming with the constant pulse of machinery. I moved quickly, senses alert. At a secluded junction, Quran awaited, flanked by two of his elite guards. His face was grim. "I've intercepted something," he said without preamble. "A plot against you and Earth." I listened as he detailed intercepted transmissions, coded messages that hinted at a coalition of smaller factions being bribed or coerced to block Earth's proposals and isolate us diplomatically. "They want to silence your voice," Quran said. "We must act fast." "Who's behind it?" "The Naxari, naturally. But they have allies you've not yet identified." "This goes deeper than you realize." We agreed on a plan to root out the conspirators, to use Quran's soldiers as covert operatives within the spire to gather intelligence, and for me to play a more aggressive role in public diplomacy, turning alliances in our favor. But the stakes were growing. Every move we made would be watched, every word analyzed for weakness. As I left the lower levels and returned to my quarters, the weight of the mission settled on me like a cloak of ice. I wasn't just fighting for Earth's place at the table. I was fighting for Earth's survival. That night, alone in my quarters, I stared out at the stars beyond the spire's walls. I thought about the long road ahead, the deception, the alliances forged in shadows, the necessity of hard choices. I remembered something my father told me once, long before I ever dreamed of representing humanity in the Galactic Concord. "Strength isn't just about muscle or firepower, son. It's about will, about refusing to be broken, no matter the odds." In this room full of shadows, I would need that will more than ever, because the game had changed, and I was no longer just a diplomat. I was a player. The first rays of artificial dawn filtered softly through the translucent panels of my quarters, but sleep had long since fled from my mind. The corridors of the Concord spire hummed with life and tension, a reflection of the turmoil simmering beneath its polished surface. My body was recovering, but my mind was sharper than ever, running through every piece of information, every suspicion. I had accepted the grim truth. Diplomacy here was a war without weapons, and I was right in the middle of it. After the covert meeting with Quran, I realized something crucial: information was power, but alliances were survival. The intricate web of factions, ambitions, and vendettas inside the spire made it clear. Earth was a new thread in a tangled tapestry. We could be pulled apart or woven into a pattern of strength. My task was to ensure the latter. That morning, I received a summons to a gathering unlike any I'd experienced before. A private assembly of Earth's allies and potential supporters from the smaller factions, those who had reasons to fear the growing dominance of the Council's major powers. It was a delicate affair hosted in a circular chamber deep inside the diplomatic sector, shielded from prying eyes and ears. The room's design was intended for open conversation, but, ironically, it felt more like a trap for careless words. The curved walls absorbed sound and reflected whispers back into the center, where I would stand. As I entered, dozens of delegates from species I barely recognized gave me wary nods. Their eyes carried the same question I felt in my gut. Can Earth survive this storm? I began by addressing the concerns I knew they had. We are all aware that the balance of power here is fragile. Every move we make echoes beyond this chamber, shaping the fate of entire star systems. Earth does not seek dominance, but partnership, a shared future where no species must live in fear of manipulation or betrayal. A murmur rippled through the delegates. Some faces softened, others remained stoic, calculating. Then came the harder part, appealing to their self-interest. The recent attacks, the poison, and covert efforts to isolate Earth are symptoms of a larger rot. If the Council allows such aggression to go unchecked, none of us will be safe. Unity and mutual support are our best defenses. Several delegates spoke up, revealing the deep fractures within the Concord. A small, reptilian ambassador from the planet Vexel, named Rul Mar, warned of the economic pressures his people faced from the Naxxari's expanding trade monopoly. An elder from the aquatic race Thalissen described escalating border skirmishes encouraged by shadowy agents intent on destabilizing the region. Another delegate, a diplomatic envoy from the machine symbiotic Cliff, expressed distrust toward the military faction Krell, citing past betrayals and broken treaties. Each spoke not just of grievances but of survival, a survival that depended on choosing allies wisely. Listening to these voices, I realized that Earth's greatest strength was not just our tenacity or technology, but our ability to serve as a bridge, a neutral force offering cooperation without hidden agendas. I seized the moment. If we can build a coalition, a network of trust among the smaller factions, we can counterbalance the influence of the major powers. This network can protect our shared interests and provide a platform for honest negotiation. That was when I noticed a figure standing apart, observing silently. She was unlike the others, humanoid, but with subtle markings glowing faintly on her skin, the emblem of the elusive enclave of Lumina. They were renowned as neutral arbiters and information brokers, a presence respected and feared throughout the Spire. Her name was Serial. Her arrival was no coincidence. After the assembly, Serial approached me privately. "Ambassador Vaughn," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of many secrets. "The situation is more complex than you realize. Your survival and Earth's place here depends on information, yes, but also on timing and trust. Too much too soon can unravel everything." She handed me a small, crystalline data chip. "This contains intelligence gathered by the Enclave. It points to a secret council within the Concord, a shadow cabal manipulating events to escalate tensions and profit from chaos." My heart skipped. If this was true, the poison attempt, the covert bribery, and the isolation efforts were only surface symptoms of a far larger conspiracy. The data chip revealed cryptic references to a group calling themselves the Veil, a covert faction that operated behind the official structure of the Concord, pulling strings, fomenting distrust, and orchestrating conflict to keep the galaxy fragmented and dependent on their control. I knew this information could shift the entire game, but also that such knowledge made me a target. Serial warned me, "The Veil's reach is long, and their agents many. You must be careful whom you trust, even among your closest allies." That night, I reviewed the data in private, cross-referencing it with the intelligence Quran's soldiers had gathered. The patterns were undeniable. The poison was not just an attack on me or Earth, but part of a larger operation designed to cripple those who sought peace and cooperation. The implications were staggering. If the Veil succeeded, the Concord could fracture into open conflict, wars that would consume entire star systems. The next day, I requested a private audience with the Council. The mood was tense. I laid out the evidence: the poison attempt, the secret cabal, the ongoing subversion. The Council members exchanged looks that were equal parts alarm and calculation. Lyrian's voice cut through the silence. "If these claims are true, the Concord faces a threat unlike any before. But how do we confront a ghost, an enemy that thrives on secrecy and division?" Quran, ever the warrior, grunted. "We root them out with force if necessary. No shadow should be allowed to blind our vision." Silthrax remained inscrutable but nodded in agreement. After the session, I was approached by an unexpected ally, Ambassador Rul Mar of Vexel. "We must act quickly," he said, urgency in his scaled features. "I will rally my people to support Earth's cause." His alliance was vital, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices could make the biggest difference. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I coordinated with Quran and Serial, weaving together intelligence, diplomatic outreach, and covert operations. Every conversation, every handshake, was now weighted with suspicion. At one point, a courier delivered a thin envelope sealed with an unfamiliar symbol, a warning or a threat. Inside was a single phrase: "The storm approaches, Ambassador. Prepare wisely." The message left me cold. The gathering storm was no longer metaphorical. Amidst this growing tension, I found brief moments of clarity. During a quiet dinner with Quran, we shared stories, not just as diplomats or warriors, but as beings caught in a tide beyond our control. "Strength," he said, "comes not just from the sword, but from the mind and the heart." I nodded. "And from knowing when to stand alone and when to stand together." The chapter closed with me standing again at the observation window of my quarters, watching the stars swirl beyond the spire's hull. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with shadows and light. Earth's place in this cosmic dance was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: the gathering storm had arrived, and we would have to weather it, together or not at all. The warning had been clear and chilling: "The storm approaches, Ambassador. Prepare wisely." Those words echoed in my mind as I stepped out of my quarters and into the labyrinthine halls of the Concord Spire. Every corner seemed darker, every smile more measured. The spire, once a symbol of unity, now felt like a cage tightening around us all. The veil was real. That shadow cabal lurking in the depths of the Concord's power structure wasn't just a conspiracy theory. It was an existential threat, and the fractures it sowed between factions were beginning to tear the fragile peace apart. I convened a secret meeting with my closest allies: Quran, the hardened soldier with more scars than trust; Serial, the enigmatic Enclave agent whose loyalty was as mysterious as the Lumina themselves; and Ambassador Rul Marvexel, whose reptilian features now seemed sharper with resolve. "We can't afford to be divided," I began, scanning the grim faces around the table. "The veil is working to pit us against each other. If we don't act quickly, their influence will spread like wildfire." Quran's fist slammed the table. "Enough talk. We need to find their operatives and take them out before they destroy the council." Serial's eyes glowed faintly as she shook her head. "Violence will only play into their hands. The veil thrives on chaos. We must root them out with subtlety, through diplomacy, deception, and strategy." Rul nodded. "Agreed. I will mobilize my networks. The smaller factions are scared and vulnerable. If we show strength through unity, we can resist their influence." I felt the weight of their words. We were walking a razor's edge. One wrong move could spark a war that would consume the Concord and Earth. The first sign of the veil's reach was subtle but unmistakable. During a routine diplomatic exchange, a delegate from the Zalkar faction, an influential power known for their isolationist policies, suddenly withdrew from ongoing trade negotiations with Earth and Vexel. Their ambassador, a towering figure named Threx, delivered a cold message: "The Zalkar will not involve themselves in Earth's affairs. It is best you do not overreach." No explanation, no room for negotiation. The sudden withdrawal raised alarms. I suspected the veil had whispered poison into Threx's ears, stoking fear and mistrust. I decided to confront the issue head-on. Summoning my courage, I requested a private meeting with Threx. In the stark chamber where we met, the air felt thick with tension. Threx's scaled face was unreadable as I began. "Ambassador, Earth seeks only peace and partnership. Your withdrawal harms us all." He leaned forward, voice low and threatening. "Your presence disrupts the balance. Some powers believe your arrival is a threat, and they have persuaded us to distance ourselves." I pressed. "Who are these powers?" "The Council demands transparency." Threx's eyes narrowed. "The Council is not always what it seems. There are forces beyond your comprehension." The words confirmed my fears. The veil's shadow reached even into the Council's highest echelons. Returning to the spire, I shared the encounter with Quran and Serial. "We need to break through this wall of silence," I said. "If the Zalkar are turning away, others might follow." Serial nodded. "There's a festival coming, a rare event where delegates from every faction gather. It's an opportunity for open dialogue, but also a gamble. The veil will be there, watching." Quran cracked his knuckles. then we better be ready. The festival was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. The central plaza of the Concord Spire transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and scents from hundreds of worlds. Species with skin that shimmered like liquid silver danced beside towering crystalline beings. The air thrummed with excitement and a subtle undercurrent of suspicion. As I moved through the crowd, I felt eyes on me, weighing, judging. The festival was a spectacle, but the real game was in the private meetings, whispered conversations, and covert deals happening behind closed doors. I met with several delegates, each encounter a thread in the growing web of alliances. The aquatic Thalissian elders, their cerulean skin glistening under the spire's lights, expressed growing concerns about border incursions fueled by Veil agents. They needed assurances Earth would support their defense. RULMAR introduced me to representatives from the Cliff, those symbiotic machine hybrids. Their distrust of the Krell faction was deep, and they sought a neutral arbiter to prevent open conflict. Serial arranged a meeting with the enigmatic Lumina Council. Their leader, a being named Elora, spoke in riddles but emphasized the importance of balance and foresight. The storm is not just outside us, Elora said, but within. You must master both to survive. Amid the festival's revelry, a sudden explosion shattered the night, sending shockwaves through the crowd. Panic erupted. Shouts and cries mixed with alarms as security forces scrambled. I instinctively moved toward the blast site, with Karan and Serial close behind. What we found was horrifying. A small, cloaked figure lay among the debris, a Veil operative caught in a failed assassination attempt. On the operative's person was a data pad, encrypted but recoverable. Back in the secure briefing room, the decrypted files revealed a sinister plan. The Veil intended to assassinate key diplomats at the festival to ignite a war between factions. Their goal was chaos, division, and domination from the shadows. I felt the cold weight of responsibility settle over me. If we failed to expose and stop the Veil now, the Concord would descend into civil war. We mobilized quickly. Using the intelligence from the operative, we coordinated with loyal security forces to prevent further attacks. Serial's network of informants moved in the shadows, uncovering conspirators hidden within trusted circles. RULMAR's forces secured vulnerable sectors, reassuring frightened delegates. And Koran led precision strikes to capture Veil agents before they could act. The confrontation culminated in a tense council session. I presented our findings: the assassination plot, the manipulation of factions, and the urgent need for a united front. The chamber buzzed with tension. Some members resisted, unwilling to admit such deep corruption, but others, moved by the evidence, called for decisive action. In the end, a fragile coalition formed, an alliance of those committed to transparency and peace. Earth was at the center, its role evolving from outsider to essential mediator. It was not victory, but a crucial step toward stability. As the chapter closed, I reflected on the fractures exposed and the alliances forged. The Veil was a ghost still haunting the corridors of power, but for the first time, we were no longer alone in facing it. Together, we had planted the seeds of resistance. And in this fractured galaxy, that might be the most precious thing of all. The weight of responsibility was heavier than ever. The alliance forged in the aftermath of the assassination attempt was fragile, stitched together with fear and desperation. Yet, it was the first genuine step toward facing the Veil's insidious reach. But in the shadowed halls of the Concord Spire, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. I found myself pacing in my quarters, staring out over the sprawling cityscape below, the neon glow of alien markets blending with the familiar twinkle of Earth's own skyline far beyond. Each light was a life, a story, a hope, and many of those hopes now rested on my shoulders. The council called for an emergency session. The chamber, usually a grand symbol of unity, felt more like a battlefield. Delegates from every faction filled the tiers, their faces masks of suspicion and barely concealed hostility. As I took my place at the podium, I felt every eye on me, every mind weighing my words as if they could decide the fate of the entire Concord. The Veil's plot is no longer hidden, I began, voice steady but urgent. We have exposed their assassination plan. We have identified conspirators within our own ranks. But this is only the beginning. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others whispered in disbelief or anger. The fractures we had hoped to mend were still raw. The question before us is simple. Do we allow this shadow to divide us? Or do we stand united, stronger than before? The chamber erupted into debate, voices rising, accusations flying. The Krell faction accused the Lumina of harboring sympathizers. The Thalissian elders demanded immediate military action. The Zalkar remained silent, their absence like a wound in the assembly. Arulmar leaned toward me, whispering, "We must tread carefully. Force alone will not bind this fractured council." I agreed. The Veil was not just an enemy to fight. It was a poison infecting the very roots of our society. Rooting it out required more than brute strength. I proposed a bold plan, a council reform. Transparency will be our strongest weapon, I declared. We must establish an independent oversight body, with representatives from every faction, to investigate corruption, monitor security, and ensure accountability. The idea was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a necessary step toward trust. Others feared it as a threat to their power. Karan, sitting just behind me, whispered fiercely, "You're playing a dangerous game. Those with the most to lose will resist fiercely." I nodded. The stakes were higher than I'd anticipated. The Lumina leader, Elora, stood to speak. "In balance, there is strength, but balance requires sacrifice. The Veil thrives on division, yes, but we must also recognize the fractures we ourselves have created." Her words carried weight. The Lumina's wisdom was respected, but also feared. They had long been seen as aloof, distant keepers of secrets rather than active players. Yet now, they were stepping into the light. "We must embrace openness," Elora continued. "Only then can the storm be weathered." Amid the debate, a new threat emerged. An unexpected faction called the Seraphis Council requested observer status. Their emissaries, tall and clad in shimmering armor, carried an aura of authority and mystery. The Seraphis had long been a myth, rumored to be elite peacekeepers with unknown origins. Their arrival was both an opportunity and a complication. I was granted a private audience with the Seraphis emissary, a stern woman named Kalis. Her gaze was piercing, her words measured. "The Veil's threat extends beyond the Concord," she said. "Our purpose is to restore order, prevent chaos from engulfing the galaxy. But our methods differ." I asked cautiously, "What do you mean by methods?" Kalis smiled thinly. "Sometimes, peace requires sacrifice. Sometimes, the few must be controlled for the many to survive." Her meaning was clear. The Seraphis believed in order through control, a kind of peace enforced by any means necessary. I left the meeting uneasy. The Seraphis could be a powerful ally, but their ideology risked igniting the very conflicts we sought to prevent. Back in the council chamber, their observer status was granted, stirring unease among many delegates. Days passed in a whirlwind of negotiations, subcommittees, and tense discussions. The oversight body was formed, a council within the council, tasked with dismantling the Veil's networks. Serial was appointed as a liaison, her enclave skills invaluable for intelligence gathering and covert operations. Arulmar and Koran rallied their factions, enforcing tighter security and rooting out suspected collaborators. I worked tirelessly to maintain the fragile coalition, mediating disputes and reminding delegates of the greater threat. Yet, cracks began to appear. The Zalkar delegation remained distant, their absence a silent warning. Rumors circulated that certain members of the council were secretly meeting with Veil agents, undermining our efforts. One night, I received an encrypted message. "Trust no one. The enemy is closer than you think." The message sent chills down my spine. I shared it with Serial and Karan. "We are in the eye of the storm," Serial said grimly. "The Veil's reach is deeper than we imagined." Karan's jaw clenched. "Then we hit harder. No mercy." I shook my head. "No. That's what they want. We need to be smarter." Our intelligence network intensified operations. We intercepted communications revealing plans for a coup aimed at toppling the council and installing a Veil puppet regime. The conspirators had infiltrated the security forces, the trade guilds, even the diplomatic corps. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any weapon. I called an emergency session. "This council stands at a crossroads," I declared. "Either we root out the traitors within, or we fall divided, prey to the Veil's darkness." The chamber was silent. One by one, delegates rose to pledge support for a purge of corruption. But the line between justice and vengeance was thin. The purge began. Trusted officials were arrested. Secret trials held behind closed doors. Alliances shattered overnight. The Concord was a battlefield, not of guns and ships, but of secrets and shadows. Through it all, I struggled to hold the coalition together. Serial's covert operations uncovered a network of spies within our own ranks. RULMAR's forces guarded the council chamber against infiltration. Koran led security sweeps, his soldiers rooting out hidden cells. But with every victory, the Veil retaliated, blackmail, sabotage, misinformation. In the midst of chaos, I found a rare moment of clarity. Standing on a balcony overlooking the city, I watched the lights flicker like distant stars. The fight was far from over. The Veil was a hydra, cut one head, two more would grow. Yet, despite the fractures and betrayals, hope remained. Because for the first time, the Concord had faced the storm together. And I knew, deep down, that our greatest test was yet to come. The more I thought about the Council's purge, the heavier the weight became on my chest. What began as a quest for justice was now a descent into murky waters where the lines between right and wrong blurred beneath the shadows. In those uncertain hours, I realized that the real enemy wasn't just the Veil, it was the darkness that could take hold of our own hearts. The aftermath of the purge was chaos masked in order. The corridors of the Concord Spire buzzed with rumors, whispers, and the uneasy silence of those watching their backs. The council chamber, once a place of deliberation, felt like a prison where suspicion was the currency and trust was a forgotten myth. I had never been more aware of the isolation of leadership. The allies I had once trusted now seemed like potential enemies. Every glance, every word could be a trap. The Veil's tendrils had sunk deeper than I ever imagined, infecting not just factions but individuals, friends, even family. One evening, as the spire dimmed into the quiet hum of night, I received a cryptic message on a secure channel. Meet me at the lower docking bay. Midnight. Alone. If you want the truth, come. The signature was absent, the sender anonymous. Classic Veil tactics. Yet, the urgency and risk demanded attention. I debated with myself for hours. Should I trust the message or dismiss it as a trap? The weight of our recent purge pressed down on me. Too many had already suffered. But my instincts, honed by years of navigating political storms, whispered that this might be a turning point. At midnight, I slipped out of the spire, cloaked beneath the darkened corridors that few dared traverse at this hour. The lower docking bay was a cavernous space, dimly lit by flickering overhead lamps and the faint glow of distant starships. Shadows stretched long across the floor, and the hum of dormant engines filled the air. As I waited, a figure emerged from the darkness, a slender silhouette clad in dark robes, face obscured beneath a hood. You came. The voice was low, cautious. I nodded. Who are you? Why risk meeting me like this? The figure hesitated, then pulled back the hood to reveal a woman, her eyes sharp, haunted. My name is Vaila. I was part of the Veil, but I left. I know things, dangerous things. Her confession sent a chill down my spine. How do I know I can trust you? I asked, hands resting near my sidearm. Vaila smiled sadly. You don't, but the Veil is preparing something catastrophic. You need to know before it's too late. We retreated to a secure room deep within the spire, and Vaila began to unravel the Veil's darkest secrets. The purge was only a distraction, she whispered. They wanted to flush out loyalists, sow distrust, and consolidate power. I leaned forward, every word burning into my mind. They have agents embedded in every major faction, even in the Seraphis Council. Their ultimate goal isn't just control of the Concord. They want to ignite a war that will leave the galaxy fractured and vulnerable. My heart raced as Vaila described the plan. The Veil intended to sabotage the fragile peace treaties during the upcoming Summit of Unity, a rare gathering of all factions to reaffirm alliances and discuss the future. The plan was to assassinate key leaders, frame rival factions, and ignite a brutal war that would engulf the galaxy. We have only weeks, Vaila warned, and time is running out. I sat back, processing the enormity of the threat. The summit was my chance to cement peace, but now it was a powder keg. I needed to act fast. I summoned Koran and Serial immediately. We have a new threat, I told them. The Veil's plan is worse than we feared. The summit could be a massacre. Koran's jaw tightened. Then we hit them before they hit us. Serial shook her head. Violence will only escalate things. We need intelligence, deception, and alliances. We agreed on a risky plan. infiltrate the Veil's network from within, and expose their agents before the summit. The days that followed were a blur of covert meetings, encrypted messages, and clandestine operations. Serial led a team of trusted operatives deep into the underbelly of the Spire, navigating a maze of secret tunnels and hidden enclaves where the Veil's influence was strongest. Quran prepared security forces, ready to strike at a moment's notice. I focused on diplomacy, working to shore up alliances and calm frayed nerves. But the deeper we probed, the more treacherous the web became. We discovered that some members of our own coalition were compromised, bribed, blackmailed, or coerced into silence. The betrayal cut deep. One evening, I received a message from an unknown source, a list of names marked for elimination, including some of my closest allies. The Veil's reach was terrifying. With time running out, I faced the impossible. Whom to trust? How to protect the Council from within? Every conversation, every alliance, now carried the weight of potential betrayal. The Summit of Unity arrived like a fragile promise hanging over the galaxy. Delegates from countless worlds gathered in the grand hall of the Concord Spire, a symbol of hope, yet shadowed by fear. I stood before them, my voice steady but my heart heavy. "We face a threat greater than any of us imagined," I said. "The Veil seeks to tear us apart through lies and violence. But together, we must stand united." The room was tense. Eyes darted suspiciously. No one could shake the feeling that danger lurked in every corner. As the summit progressed, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with Serial's operatives to expose the Veil's agents. It was a dangerous game. One wrong move could trigger the chaos the Veil craved. Then, on the second night of the summit, disaster nearly struck. An explosion rocked the eastern wing, sending delegates fleeing in panic. Security forces quickly contained the threat. A crude bomb planted near the quarters of a high-ranking Lumina delegate. I rushed to the scene, the acrid smell of smoke thick in the air. The attack was a clear message. The Veil was watching, striking when least expected. In the tense aftermath, the Council convened emergency talks. Accusations flew like daggers. The fragile unity threatened to shatter. But I refused to let fear win. "We cannot let the Veil dictate our future," I declared. "We must root out the traitors and protect the peace we have fought so hard to build." With renewed determination, the Council agreed to tighten security and increase transparency. Serial's team intensified their hunt. Coron marshaled forces to defend the Spire, and I continued to broker alliances, walking the fine line between diplomacy and survival. Yet, the shadows of deceit lingered. I knew the Veil was still out there watching, waiting. The battle for the soul of the Concord was far from over. But in the darkness, I held on to one truth. Humanity's strength was not just in our technology or weapons, but in our resilience, our capacity for trust and unity. And that was a light the Veil could never extinguish. The tension in the Concord Spire was palpable, thick enough to choke on. The Summit of Unity was now more than a political gathering. It was a battleground of wills, a razor's edge balancing between fragile peace and devastating conflict. After the bombing, the atmosphere was electric with suspicion, anxiety, and the heavy weight of looming betrayal. I sat in my quarters overlooking the Spire's central plaza, the view of countless ships orbiting silently a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside. The galaxy had gathered here, representatives of countless worlds and ideologies, each bearing their own ambitions and fears. The summit was supposed to be the light at the end of a long tunnel, a moment where we could all exhale and commit to a future without war. Yet, the Veil's shadow hung over everything like a storm cloud, threatening to break and drown us all. My thoughts were interrupted by the urgent buzz of my communicator. It was Serial. "Captain, we've just intercepted a transmission. Veil operatives are coordinating a strike, something big, and it's set for tonight during the final address." The blood drained from my face. The final address was the crescendo of the summit, where all factions would gather to hear the pact of peace renewed and sealed. It would be broadcast across the galaxy. If the Veil struck then, the damage would be catastrophic, not just in lives lost, but in shattering trust across the factions. "We can't let that happen," I said, already rising from my chair. "Prepare your team. We'll need every available hand." I made my way swiftly through the corridors, the sterile lighting blurring as adrenaline took hold. The Spire was a fortress, designed to be impregnable, yet I knew its walls could not stop treachery from within. Veil agents were like shadows, invisible until they struck. I met with Serial and Koran in the command center, a hive of frantic activity. Holomaps projected over the table, highlighting key areas, movement patterns, and sensor sweeps. Serial, what's our intel on the Veil's network? I asked. We've identified 3 potential strike teams embedded in the summit. One near the main hall, one in the docking bays, and a third in the communications tower. Their goal is likely a multi-pronged assault to cripple security, broadcast chaos, and assassinate key leaders, she explained. Karan's jaw clenched. We hit them before they hit us. Not yet, I cautioned. We need to catch them in the act. If we move too early, we risk losing our element of surprise, and the Veil's network goes dark. Hours passed as we coordinated our forces, deploying surveillance drones, tightening security checkpoints, and setting up contingency plans. The delegates moved through the spire with a mixture of guarded formality and visible anxiety. Trust was a fragile thread stretched thin. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a knife's edge. Every step could be my last if I miscalculated. As night deepened, the hall filled with dignitaries and ambassadors, their faces masks of calm professionalism but eyes flickering with unease. The air was thick with anticipation. The final address was moments away. I took my place at the command center, watching the live feed. The Chancellor of the Seraphis Council stepped onto the podium, a symbol of unity. Her voice rang out, steady and clear as she spoke of hope, resilience, and the strength found in cooperation. Suddenly, alarms blared. Breach detected in docking bay Gamma. A voice announced over the intercom. Security forces surged toward the bay. From the command center, I saw on the holomap a squad of armed figures emerging from a hidden cargo container, their uniforms dark and unmarked. They're here, I muttered. Serial's team moved quickly, but the Veil operatives were well prepared, fighting with ruthless precision. A firefight erupted, shadows dancing in the flickering lights as the 2 forces clashed. Meanwhile, in the communications tower, sensors picked up suspicious activity, an operative trying to override the broadcast feed. We're losing the broadcast, the communications chief shouted. Karan barked orders, dispatching teams to intercept. Back in the main hall, the Chancellor's speech faltered as the lights flickered. Panic rippled through the crowd. Stay calm, I commanded over the comms, but calm was a fragile illusion. Through the chaos, I spotted a figure slipping through the crowd, a high-ranking delegate moving with unnatural stealth. I recognized her immediately. Voila, I called out. She turned, eyes fierce and urgent. We don't have much time, she said. The Veil's plan is more complex than we thought. They're targeting not just the summit, but the very heart of the Concord's communication network. If they succeed, the galaxy will descend into war. I nodded, adrenaline sharpening my focus. We need to stop them, I said. Together, we moved swiftly through the turmoil, weaving between panicked delegates and security forces. Vaila led me to a maintenance hatch she had discovered earlier, an access point to the communication control room. We have to get there before they disable the network completely, she warned. The corridor was narrow and dark, the tension suffocating. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of impending doom. As we reached the control room entrance, a burst of gunfire erupted behind us. The Veil operatives had discovered our trail. I dove for cover as Vaila fired back with precise, controlled bursts. Karan's team will be here soon, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Vaila nodded, eyes scanning for escape routes. The standoff was intense but brief. Reinforcements arrived just in time to corner the attackers. The firefight ended, leaving the room littered with the aftermath of battle. In the dim glow of emergency lights, I accessed the communication terminal. Vaila worked alongside me, fingers flying over the controls. We're not just restoring the broadcast, she explained. We're sending a countermessage, a reveal of the Veil's plot to every faction in real time. Transparency is our best weapon. With a final keystroke, the feed was restored. Across the galaxy, the truth of the Veil's conspiracy played out live. Evidence, intercepted communications, names of conspirators. The broadcast was a gamble, exposing our vulnerabilities, but also striking a blow against the Veil's power. Back in the hall, the Chancellor resumed her speech, this time with renewed vigor. We will not be divided by fear or lies, she declared. Together, we stand stronger. The delegates erupted in applause, tentative, but hopeful. As the summit concluded, I felt the weight of the night settle over me. The Veil had been dealt a serious blow, but the war was far from over. Trust had been shaken, alliances tested. Yet, beneath the fractures, something stronger was growing, an understanding that unity was our greatest strength. Walking alone through the empty corridors after the summit, I reflected on the events of the past weeks. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, filled with shadows and deceit. But I believed, no, I knew, that humanity's resilience, its capacity for hope and cooperation, would be the light that guided us through. Because in this vast, uncertain universe, the greatest weapon we had was not our technology or firepower. It was our ability to trust one another, to stand united against the darkness. And as long as that flame burned bright, we would endure. The aftermath of the summit was a strange kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after a storm, when the air is thick with uncertainty and tension. I could feel it pulsing in every corridor of the Concord spire. Whispers, sideways glances, cautious words exchanged in hushed tones. The Veil's sabotage attempt had rocked us all to the core, but what came next was even more dangerous. The fractures in trust, the hidden agendas bubbling to the surface. I sat alone in my quarters, staring at the hollow screen that still flickered with footage from the final broadcast. The revelation of the Veil's plot laid bare for the galaxy to see. Every faction had witnessed it. Every leader had been forced to confront it. But did that bring us closer together? Or had it cracked the fragile alliance beyond repair? The answer was murky. The next morning, the airlock hissed open and Serial stepped inside, her face grave. She didn't need to say anything. The tension was written all over her. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. I gestured for her to sit. "What's the latest?" "The fallout is worse than we expected," she replied, voice low. "The Seraphis Council is calling for an emergency vote to impose sanctions on several factions they claim were complicit with the Veil." I rubbed my temples. Complicit? That's absurd. They're grasping for scapegoats. True, but some factions do have questionable ties. The Towering Collective, for example. There's evidence that some of their officials turned a blind eye to Veil operatives. I shook my head. That kind of accusation will only deepen divisions. We need to keep the coalition intact. Agreed, Serial said. But diplomacy is a minefield right now. Every faction is playing politics, trying to protect their own interests. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the gleaming surface of the Concord spire. Ships of all shapes and sizes orbited silently, carrying representatives who were once united by a common goal. Now, they were wary strangers. "Do you think the Alliance can survive this?" I asked. Serial met my gaze. "It has to. We don't have another option." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Later that day, I attended the emergency council meeting. The chamber was crowded with representatives, their faces a mix of anger, suspicion, and exhaustion. The Seraphis Chancellor opened the session with a firm statement. "The Veil's betrayal has exposed vulnerabilities in our alliance. We must take decisive action to root out corruption and ensure this never happens again." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Then came the Tauran delegate, a tall, stern woman named Alara. Her voice was sharp, defensive. "We categorically deny any complicity with the Veil. To cast blame without proof risks tearing apart the fragile peace we've built." The room erupted in debate, voices rising, accusations flying. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Vaila, who had been my ally throughout the summit. "We need to calm this," she said quietly. "If we fracture now, the Veil wins." I nodded. "I'll speak." When the room quieted, I stood and addressed the assembly. "Friends, the Veil's attack was a wake-up call, yes, but it must not be a wedge to drive us apart. We are here because we share a vision, a galaxy where diplomacy triumphs over destruction, where cooperation is stronger than fear." I let my words hang in the air. We cannot afford to alienate one another. Instead, we must strengthen our mechanisms for transparency and accountability. Let us establish a joint task force, representatives from every faction, to investigate the Veil's infiltration and recommend measures to prevent it from happening again. The room was silent for a moment. Then the Seraphis Chancellor nodded slowly. "An excellent proposal. It preserves unity and addresses concerns." Others murmured agreement. Alara gave a reluctant nod. But even as the council accepted the idea, I knew the underlying tensions wouldn't vanish overnight. Old grudges, fears, and rivalries still lurked beneath polite diplomacy. After the meeting, I met with Koran in the command center. He was reviewing security footage from the recent attacks. "The Veil is more organized than we thought," he said grimly. "They're embedded deeper, with sleeper cells scattered across multiple factions." I sighed, which means this task force will have to tread carefully. "The line between friend and foe is blurred," he nodded, "and it means we have to be prepared for anything." That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the corridors of the spire, the hum of the station a strange lullaby. Memories of the bombing played through my mind, the chaos, the fear, but also the moments of courage and solidarity. Despite everything, there was hope. But hope was fragile, and it needed nurturing. The next day, I convened a preliminary meeting of the Joint Task Force. Representatives from the major factions gathered around the table. Some were wary, others openly hostile. Voila stood beside me, her presence a steady reassurance. "We are here to build bridges," I began, "to find truth without blame, to strengthen trust without suspicion." I outlined the task force's mandate: to investigate Veil activities, share intelligence, and develop security protocols to protect the Alliance. Questions and concerns followed. Some delegates pushed for swift, harsh action against suspected collaborators. Others urged patience and due process. I listened carefully, mediating the discussion. In that moment, I realized the true challenge was not just defeating the Veil, but healing the fractures it had inflicted on us. Over the following weeks, the task force worked tirelessly. Intelligence was shared, investigations launched, sleeper cells were uncovered and arrested. But for every victory, new complications arose. One faction accused another of withholding evidence. Diplomats whispered of sabotage. The fragile web of trust frayed dangerously. One evening, as I reviewed reports with Vaila, she leaned back and sighed. "This is harder than I thought," she admitted. "The Veil's poison runs deep." I nodded. "We have to keep going, because if we don't, the whole alliance will collapse." She smiled faintly. "And humanity's role?" I looked her in the eye. "We must be the glue, the example. We have a chance to show the galaxy what cooperation really means." But the pressures were mounting. Back in the council chamber, debates grew more heated. Some factions began pushing their own agendas under the guise of security. Old rivalries reignited. The threat of civil conflict loomed. One night, I received a coded message from an unexpected source, a veiled defector seeking asylum and offering information. The message chilled me. They claimed that the Veil planned a second, more devastating strike, this time aimed directly at the leadership of the Concord itself. The timing, just as the Alliance reached its breaking point. I convened an urgent meeting with Serial, Karan, and Vaila. "We have to prepare," I said. "If the Veil's plan succeeds, it will shatter any hope of unity." Serial nodded. "We'll increase security, but more importantly, we need to strengthen the Alliance's resolve." Karan added, "and root out any remaining Veil sympathizers." Vaila looked determined. "This is our moment. If we can survive this, the Alliance will emerge stronger." In the days that followed, the tension in the spire was unbearable. Security was tightened to near military levels. Every corridor, every airlock, every meeting room was swept and reswept for threats. But the real battle was still in the hearts and minds of the delegates. I found myself mediating disputes, calming tempers, reminding everyone why we were here. One evening, as I prepared for the next council session, Vaila approached me. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. "The defector's information is credible, but incomplete. The Veil's plan is more complex than we realize." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're not just targeting leaders," she said. "They want to dismantle the Alliance's core systems, communications, intelligence, even the Council's decision-making protocols. It's a coordinated coup disguised as chaos." My mind raced. "This isn't just an attack," I said slowly. "It's an attempt to erase the Alliance from within." Vaila nodded. "And if they succeed, war will engulf the galaxy." I realized then the true stakes of our struggle. This was not just about diplomacy or politics. It was about survival. As the chapter closes, I stand on the balcony overlooking the stars. The galaxy is vast, full of dangers seen and unseen. But I believe in the spark of hope we have kindled. The Alliance may be fractured, but it is not broken. And I will fight with everything I have to keep it together, because the future of countless worlds depends on it. The night before the final council vote was restless. The entire Concord spire seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls sensed the gravity of what was coming. I paced my quarters, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The fragile alliance, the Veil's looming threat, the lives that depended on my choices. It was as if the galaxy had converged into this single moment, and all the hope and fear of countless worlds balanced on a knife's edge. I stared out at the star-studded void beyond the observation deck, the silence broken only by the distant hum of ships and the low murmur of the station's life support systems. The cold beauty of space felt almost cruel in contrast to the turmoil inside me. Tomorrow, we would face the Council again, not just with words, but with the unyielding force of truth and unity. The Veil had pushed us to the brink, their sabotage and deception shaking us to our core. But this was our moment to show that humanity's indomitable spirit, our relentless drive for cooperation and understanding, could forge something stronger than hatred and division. The final preparations. Morning came too quickly. I met with Vaila and Serial early in the command center, the air thick with urgency. The task force had worked tirelessly, uncovering Veil cells and cutting off their networks, but the threat was far from over. The defectors' intelligence had been invaluable, but also chilling. The Veil's plan to cripple our alliance from within was more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. "We're ready," Serial said firmly, reviewing the final security protocols. "Every possible vector of attack has been secured." Karan stood nearby, eyes sharp. "We've deployed rapid response teams across the spire. If the Veil tries anything, we'll be ready." Vaila nodded, her calm confidence a steadying force. "But the real challenge is the Council. If we fracture there, all our efforts on the security front will be wasted." I took a deep breath. "Then let's make sure they see the truth, the unity we can achieve, not the chaos the Veil wants to sow." The Council assembles. The chamber filled quickly with delegates from every faction. Their faces reflected the tension, some wary, others resolute, a few openly hostile. I took my place at the front, alongside Vaila and Serial, knowing all eyes were on us. The Seraphist Chancellor opened the session with measured words. "We convene at a critical juncture, when our unity is tested as never before. The Veil's attacks have revealed cracks in our alliance, but also opportunities for growth and renewal." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The vote today will decide the future of the Concord." Voices of division. As expected, the debate was fierce. Some factions demanded harsh measures, stripping suspected collaborators of their influence, imposing severe sanctions, even calling for the expulsion of entire groups accused of harboring Veil sympathizers. The Tauran delegate Alara spoke passionately against such draconian steps. "We must not punish entire peoples for the sins of a few," she argued. "Justice demands evidence, fairness, and the preservation of trust." Others accused the Taurans of hiding complicity, stoking old rivalries. The chamber echoed with accusations and recriminations, the alliance's fragile foundation shaking under the strain. I saw Vaila quietly signaling for calm, her presence a balm amid the storm. My speech. When the council's uproar finally waned, I stood. "Esteemed delegates, friends," I began, my voice steady but filled with conviction. "We face a crisis unlike any before. The Veil has tried to divide us through fear and suspicion, but we cannot let that fear dictate our actions." I paused, letting the room absorb my words. "Every faction here has suffered. Every world has been scarred. But that shared pain can be a bond, not a barrier." I spoke from the heart, sharing stories from the summit, moments when enemies stood side by side to save lives, when diplomats risked everything for peace. Unity is not easy. It requires trust, compromise, and courage. But it is the only way forward. I proposed the final vote, to reaffirm the Concord as a coalition committed to cooperation, justice, and collective security, with stronger mechanisms for transparency and accountability, but without scapegoating or exclusion. The vote. The chamber fell silent as the vote began. Each delegate's choice was a ripple of hope or despair, and I could feel the tension like static electricity. One by one, votes were cast. The tally was close, but when the final count came in, the motion passed. A cheer erupted from some corners, while others sat in stunned silence. A threat unleashed. Just as relief began to spread, alarms blared through the spire. The Veil had launched their second strike. Explosions rocked the lower decks. Power flickered. Communications went dark in critical sectors. I grabbed my comm, barking orders as the situation spiraled. Rallying the defenders, Karan and Vaila were already mobilizing response teams. "We hold the line here," Karan shouted. "No Veil cell gets through." Serial coordinated damage control. Her voice calmed despite the chaos. I moved through the command center, relaying updates, calming fears, and reminding everyone why we fought. The battle within. The Veil's attack was brutal. Not just physical destruction, but a coordinated cyber assault aimed at crippling the Council's command systems. For a terrifying hour, the Spire was on the brink of collapse, but the Alliance held. Delegates from all factions joined security teams, working side by side. Old rivalries faded as the urgency of survival united us. The turning point. In the midst of battle, Vaila received a decrypted message from the Veil defector. "They've compromised the central AI," she said grimly. "We need to manually override it." With a small team, she rushed to the AI core, a nerve center deep inside the Spire. I followed, knowing failure was not an option. The heart of the Spire. The AI core was a cavernous chamber, pulsing with lights and data streams. Vaila worked swiftly, bypassing security protocols, countering Veil malware. The room shook from distant blasts. Time was running out. Success and sacrifice. Finally, Vaila bypassed the Veil's control. The AI rebooted, restoring systems across the Spire. Cheers erupted over comms. But as we turned to leave, an explosion rocked the chamber. Vaila was thrown back, wounded but alive. Aftermath. Back in the council chamber, the mood was somber but victorious. We had survived the Veil's assault and proven the strength of our alliance. The vote to deepen cooperation passed unanimously. Reflection and hope. That night, I stood once again on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but united, we were stronger than ever. I believed in this alliance, in the potential of every species and every individual to rise above fear and hatred. Humanity had shown what true diplomacy and courage could achieve, and this was only the beginning.